director and professor at the Center for Public Policy Studies at the University of Poznan. And as I mentioned already, Marek is coming back after 3 years. I remember that I actually looked at what was your keynote speech in 2016, and it seems that at that time you started the research that you are going to present now. At that time you were also talking about social stratification and research as a kind of non-democratic way of distinguishing between different kind of academics. But at that time most of your title had a question mark, so you were at the beginning of your research. Now ever since then you published a book by Routledge, and now you are back and we are very excited to see that research completed. So the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon, everyone. It's not easy to be speaking just before a wonderful, fabulous dinner. And I know it because I was here a few years ago. But still, I hope I'll manage. Yes, indeed. I had a pretty nice story being presented here a few years ago. The question mark, what's going on? At that time, it was just one type of stratification, performance stratification. After 3 years, it's more advanced. The book was published. The ideas are much more elaborated. Okay, as you can see, I will talk about divided academic profession, or I would say academic professions in plural. Policy implications of social stratification. I'll be saying we are divided by different dimensions. I mentioned today just 2, but in the last slide I mentioned a number 5. We are heavily divided, and I would say those divisions intensify. Referring briefly to what Jan said, indeed there are those haves and have-nots, and those who suffer and those who, as you nicely put it, fly to Budapest. And there is something in it based on large-scale empirical data which I collected basically over the last decade. We started the project in data collection a decade ago. So I would never engage in such a long-term project because I'm too old probably. But in this case it was 10 years. Yeah. So the speech is about how academics are deeply stratified and sharply graded. I'm saying academics, normally in other contexts I'm saying scientists or academic scientists. Empirical material which I'm using is large scale. It's mostly quantitative, but it's international. It comes from 11 countries. The background concepts are 3 here. It's competition among academics and among institutions. It's certainly vertical differentiation in higher education systems, from top layers to middle layers to lower layers. And third, consistently in the last 20 years, and I met Matthias 19 years ago at CEU, where I was OSI International Policy Fellow. I consistently refer to the attractiveness of the academic profession. So this is the third concept. While international comparative research is focused on institutions and systems, mostly, I'm adding this additional dimension, which is a micro level of each of us, or scientists, individual scientists. Empirical background comes from more than 70,000 return surveys, more than 500 interviews from 11 European countries. Research will be in the center of the speech, as opposed to the previous speech where the certainly teaching was in the focus. The principal focus of this speech is not teaching. It's definitely research, even though it's in the center of only parts of higher education sector, usually top layers in every country, usually flagship universities, but still enormously important for national systems. Research is used here, as I put it, as a powerful academic game, which is not inclusive at all, which is not democratic at all. And finally, referring to what Yehuda said, is absolutely not egalitarian. It's also unrelated to teaching mission, to community engagement mission, and many other missions, social inclusion missions, and many other missions which we normally relate to universities. So research is viewed here as prestige-driven. Let me remind the book by Paul Blackmore, Prestige in Academia. It's ruthlessly internationally competitive. We rarely mention it, how research is competitive. It's absolutely fundamentally competitive. And at the same time, importantly, it's at the heart of academic recognition and reward systems, especially in top layers of the systems. There's nothing else at the moment, perhaps except for the UK, slightly, and contrary to the European patterns. So there is nothing else at the heart of recognition and reward systems than pure research and, as was mentioned in this hall several times, those bloody Web of Science publications and this Scopus highly cited outputs. So this is my topic by way of introduction. By way of context, it should be a context. There are many contexts to these changes which I'm going to be talking about. It's not only massification. There is also new public management. There is also new conception of a university should be working as part of public sector generally. I put it massification because I think it's important and we don't remember about it too much. We have massification of education, but at the same time we have a massification of academic profession. There are clearly more and more of us, and it costs more and more. So huge numbers of students are accompanied, especially globally, are accompanied by huge numbers of academics or academic scientists. And those changes which I will be referring to today are somehow related to massification as a context, but not only. It's certainly globalization, it's certainly public sector reforms. There's a number of dimensions. One of them is massification of the academic profession. As I put it here, the basic assumption of the speech is as follows, and I took it from Simon Marginson, who related it to institutions. As massification progresses, stratification follows. He was talking about institutions, and I'm talking about individual academics. More and more, massification progresses, stratification follows. Probably, there's no other way. I'll be talking about three types of stratification. First is academic performance stratification, or we are divided by research output from high to low, to quite often none at all. We are divided by academic income, or there is academic salary stratification from high income to low income. Hopefully, not no income at the moment, but low income to very low income. And finally, the third type of certification we're talking about is international research certification. We are in our research either internationalists or locals. And the question is simple, are you collaborating in our survey? Are you collaborating with international colleagues in your research? Yes, I am. No, I'm not. If I'm not collaborating in research in the past 3 years, I'm local in my research. So my hard distinction is between internationalists and locals. And the certification I termed, in this case, international research certification. And the critical point is as follows. Social certification in education refers directly to academics and their work and lives, especially work and lives. My work is follows on working hours distribution by week or by year, gender, all possible types of distinctions in our working life, academic work, but also in our lives. So I'm saying here, social certification can be operationalized. I wasn't sure about it 3 years ago when I was here. I was talking only about output. I never thought other dimensions can also be rigorously measured, and they can. So they can be rigorously measured, as I said, and they can be compared cross-nationally. And this is what I did. In the last book. Very briefly, data and methods. It's not really important. 2 large-scale projects, CAP and URAC. Perfect, wonderful, self-produced, academically produced data sets. 11 countries. You can see the names here. As John Locke told me, it's UK. It's not England. It's really UK. It was weighted to the whole country. micro level of individuals is analyzed. So data are primary, they're comparable. The individual academic is the unit of analysis. It's not the institution, it's not the system, it's not the discipline, it's not the cluster of disciplines, it's just the individual academic. As you can see, more than 17,000 return surveys, more than 400 variables. I could spend probably another decade analyzing with my colleagues, but it's probably not worth it. So what I wanted to say, I already said what I'm saying now and in the next 2 years. The speech will be focused on highly productive academics, the upper 10%, I call them research top performers, and highly paid academics, the upper 20%, I call them academic top earners. And finally, highly internationalist academics or internationalists in research, as opposed to those locals whom I already mentioned. The questions were as follows: who they are, how they work, what is their working time distribution, what is their academic role orientation, etc., etc. So the first stratification, which I'm discussing in more detail, is academic performance stratification. Those you mentioned, elites and the rest, more or less. This class of top performers has not been explored cross-nationally. We had quite a few studies of, say, UK psychologists or academics from a given institution. But this is the first study in which they are treated cross-nationally. And what my research shows: first, inherent undemocracy in relation to individual research performance, inherent fundamental undemocracy. The strongly skewed distribution of research productivity with a long tail on the right. When you see a long tail on the right, you know the elite is over there, or those the highest prices are there, or those the richest in Italy are over there. You see, this is not the Gaussian distribution, but Pareto distribution. You can't see too much. Don't look here. Can you make it full screen, please? Okay. When we look at publications, and this is the core of research, published research is publication. About half of all publications in our Q sample is produced by those 10% of top performers. We know it. But when you look at Scopus data, which I'm doing right now, and you look at millions of publications, the skewness is even higher. 10% produce 60 to 70%, depending on the cluster of disciplines or discipline, depending on the country. So this is half of academic knowledge production is produced by 10% of academics. And if you look at more detailed data, more like Scopus, it can be 60 or even 70%. It's not really important to look at the details, but what I wanted to say is to show it graphically. You see what I mentioned. I'm sorry. Oh yeah. I'm very sorry. I must be tired. Okay, I'm here. about technology. I'm thinking about right is next, and here right is not next. Just what I mentioned, you see this distribution. A lot of people produce nothing or a bit of research, and only a few people produce large quantities of research. And let me make sure it moves to the right direction. Yes. Again, something you mentioned very briefly. Who are those top performers? They are predominantly male. I wouldn't say they are young. They are middle-aged. Mean age for those thousands is 47. They are clearly full professors. Their research tends to be international in scope and orientation. They publish abroad, obviously. They also focus on basic and theoretical rather than applied research. These are top performers. They work longer total working hours and longer research hours. To give an example, in Germany, German top performers, those upper 10% of academics spend 2 months, 42 full days per year. And in Norway, they spend 46 more days, which is 2 months if we include weekends. So they work a lot, and they work a lot in research. Across all the system studies, they are more research-oriented than the rest of academics, and this research orientation is a powerful indicator of being a top performer. Definitely. This is exactly the same in Central Eastern Europe as we studied. The implications are as follows. If you are teaching-oriented, it actually excludes you from the potentiality of being among top performers. There's 1.5% of those really research-oriented who come to the class of top performers. Okay, and very briefly, my findings confirm that academic knowledge production hinges on top performers, hinges on them. 10% of people, 50% of publications. But interestingly, they are highly homogeneous across the whole Europe. They work similarly. They have similar working patterns and the same role orientation. They differ sharply internationally from their colleagues, but they are similar internationally. Anyway, and this is one of those questions you said, are there whether any protests or is there someone suffered but nobody complained. I'm relating this idea of complaining to the stability of education, to fairness and meritocracy. So I'm assuming that higher education is based on meritocratic assumptions, and the legitimacy of the system is not really questioned. The egalitarian ideology that binds scientists together protects it as a whole. There are thousands of academics in these highly stratified systems who can't complain because the rules are fairness and meritocracy. So anyone can become a full professor at Aalto as long as, and these rules are meritocratic, and they are research-based. The next type of stratification I want to mention very briefly is salary stratification. I was comparing those top earners, upper 20% of academics across Europe in terms of academic income, but only restricted to those 40 plus. I was not complaining young, but older. Only those with at least 10 years of academic experience. And I was comparing them within cluster of academic fields and within countries. So I was not complaining, say, Swiss business professors with Polish professors of sociology. I was doing analysis within clusters of fields and within countries. And then I arrived at conclusions. Interestingly, top earners are substantially more productive, up to 140%, than the rest of academics. They are publishing much more, especially internationally. But, interestingly, they do not work longer research hours, and they do not work shorter teaching hours. For decades, we were assuming in higher education research that those who make good money in higher education are spending much more time on research, and are not really teaching as much as others. It looks like it's not the case. Interestingly, research and teaching time doesn't matter. What matters are different factors. This is just patterns. You can see academic top earners in blue. You can see at whatever country we look, and really at whatever measure we look, the patterns are the same. In every country, academic top earners are much more productive, especially in terms of internationally co-authored article equivalents, but not only. It's not really exact productivity which matters, it's the pattern that matters, and all the results are statistically significant. So my research doesn't confirm the finding that working time is important for increasing academic salaries, which was the basis of higher education research for many decades. Top earners spend more time on all academic activities except for teaching and research. They spend more time on administration, on non-commercial service, on peer review, on grant reviews, etc. But they don't spend more time on teaching and research. And let's remember, I excluded all administrators from this survey. I'm talking only about science. Finally, the third stratification type is also research related, this international research stratification. My results show that both institutions and individual academics are stratified by international research collaboration, and it is strongly correlated with high research productivity. I would say there are clearly two prototypical figures in higher education. These are internationalists and locals. And again, they work in similar manners. They spend time, working time, academic time, in similar manners. But what I'm observing, especially based on interviews, is that international research contributes to the increasing stratification of academic profession. What you kindly mentioned at those Budapest flying stars, it might be the issue. That's the way academic profession is stratified. It's about funding stratification, it's about research stratification, it's about international collaboration, and all is related somehow to research. It's not, again, not so much important to get into the details, but if you look at research productivity by cluster of academic fields, and if you compare internationalists to locals, and if you take locals at 100%, internationalists in some cases are 1,000%, so 10 times more in terms of productivity. This is nice, and you can see it in the Polish case by many more clusters. In some clusters it's 10 times more than average. So the patterns again are important, not exactly the details. And now in all 11 countries, those internationalists are much more productive. They produced from 200 to 1,000 more papers in the period of 3 years which I studied. What it means generally, it means that European academics who do not collaborate internationally, that is locals, in Poland 1/3 of academics, may suffer increasing losses, both in terms of research resources and in terms of prestige. It's not clear to academics and it's not clear to young academics, but lack of this international collaboration is a blow. And it means, well, as you said, suffering. Academic performance certification is linked to research resources certification and to academic journalist certification. It's just a couple of ideas. Some academics produce papers in some places and others in other places. And only such detailed, careful research assessment exercises as now in Poland can show the differences, not only for those academics but also for those institutions or those departments. And those details will be translated into differences in funding. Very briefly, finally, policy implications. First, performance stratification. I'll go stratification by stratification. Most of all, those implications are important for young academics. Whatever we say, academic profession is not egalitarian, and whatever we say, young academics need to know where they want to be during their careers, where they want to be, in which part of their national sectors. They need to know what to do or what not to do, and how to spend time or how not to spend time. That's one of those policy lessons at the individual level. Forget about nations, forget about institutions, departments. Let's focus on, in this case, young academics. What to do and what not to do and why. And what would be policy implications if I take this road or another road. So you would see immediately the difference between job profiles for those working in research-intensive institutions and those working in teaching-only institutions. You see different job profiles, you see different expectations. After 10 years, you see where you are, and you can't move anywhere else because of what we know about this inherent undemocracy of the science system. The entry ticket to top performance, very briefly. Long research hours, definitely. Long total working hours, unfortunately. High research orientation, it can happen. High levels of international collaboration, which has to be fundable, All those are tickets leading to this status of top performers. And you know it's 10% of academics who are across Europe most productive. Policy implications of this academic salary. Again, if you have a taste for research, remember, much of your time will be spent on non-research activities in any system. And if you want to have more research time, go to the US. That's one of the reasons this line of research, which I published in Science and Public Policy, was commented in an editorial in Nature. They wanted to show this one point. Young guys, if you want to do a lot of research, go to the US. Because, as KWIEK shows, across Europe, you will spend a lot of time in those areas which are not research related at all. It's administration, it's whatever, but it's not research. So if you want to offer an attractive academic job for those research oriented, you need to give more time for research to those who want to follow this career. As I put it here, maybe nicely, research cannot be a bonus for weekends. And this is a Central European story. It can be a bonus for weekends and for summer breaks. It's not so strict and so acute in Western systems, but in Central Eastern Europe, which is cash poor and resource poor, this is quite often a choice. And policy implications of this international research stratification. First of all, internationalists compete directly with locals today. In every country, even we see it or we didn't see it, they compete for funding in national research councils, they compete for jobs in top universities. I would say they compete for everything. So this is important to remember it. And the rules governing incentives and rewards are homogeneous across Europe. They are international prestigious publications, and this is the key success factor. And we know it from the data, we know it from the interviews, we just know it. No matter what older academics like me are saying, young academics must know it. This is the rule of the game, and it's not going to be changed soon, except for the lower layers of systems. Consequently, scholarly publishing is more than an individual matter. It's becoming a departmental matter. It's becoming an institutional matter, because it determines both institutional and departmental funding. It defines research-rich versus research-poor units within institutions. In Central Eastern Europe, and in some countries in particular, Poland being a good example, which institutions are resource-poor and which are resource-rich depends on publications. There are several systems that I can enumerate them. where publications count, because most funding is competitive, and most funding is not core, but competitive related, whether it comes from the state or comes from state institutions like national research councils. Finally, internationalists differ fundamentally in their academic attitudes and behaviors from locals. We know it based on thousands of surveys. We know they think differently. We know they work differently. We know finally they publish differently. So it's good to remember what the difference is. And conclusions in 3 to 4 minutes, please. I would say that research and its funding, because in some countries it's closely related, is the single most stratifying factor in higher education enterprise today. What divides us is research. When I'm saying academic income, it's related to research. When I'm saying international collaboration, stratification, it's related to research. And in a moment I will show 5 more dimensions where research matters. So research is the most stratifying factor today. The changing character, but also volume, but also structure of research funding stratifies us. So the states are changing us and our behavior as scientists through changing volume, character, and structure of research funding. We follow and we do what the funders want from us, more or less. More in cash-poor countries like Central Eastern Europe, less in Western Europe, but generally this is a principal agent theory which shows who is paying can expect some type of behavior, even among scientists. Finally, all those tensions which I mentioned can go down to the individual level of academics, so to each of us. There are many tensions around, but some of them go down, are filtered to us. They can be operationalized, they can be measured across systems, then across institutional types, then across disciplines, age, cohorts, etc., etc. I would say the tensions are different for genders, they are different for different age cohorts. Young academics have absolutely different problems today in science systems than older academics. And I wrote a separate chapter about it. We are coming almost to an end. Individual academics are at the center of changes today. We are talking about globalization or funding or governance modes or whatever. But finally, at the center of the changes are us academics and tensions which we can feel. In both research-focused institutions and in teaching-focused institutions, these changes filter down to our work, which is nothing but also to our life. And we measure the differences in lives. 55 plus hours per week for professors is a lot, isn't it? It's more than 10 hours a day if we are talking about 5 days a week. But who is working 5 days a week today? Almost no one. So all those tensions go down to our lives, not only our academic work. As I promised, there are stratification types related to research, which I discussed, but there are also other types. Just have a look. We are heavily divided by academic positions. I call it academic power stratification. We know it in details. The young academics and the older academics in universities and their influence. Then we are divided by age cohorts, clearly. We are divided by gender, enormously. You mentioned, I remember the slide, usually top performers are male, young, usually male. And this is, I would say, the gender issue is enormously important in the stratification topic. Finally, we are divided by funding, access or no access to funding. And we are also divided by academic or access to journals or academic journal stratification, I term it. Some of us publish it somewhere, others publish somewhere else. And these are absolutely different trajectories in science. And we know the consequences when you look at the data, who is doing what, and what are the trajectories over time. One only comment, I'm just right now working on 100,000 Polish academics with every detail possible, including year of birth, etc. Matched to hundreds of thousands of publications over the last 20 years. And we see the differences between those publishing in the top journals and others. We see all the difference. It's interesting to remember that those tensions are around even though we don't have data about it. I have only Polish data. It would be wonderful to have 1.5 million academics analyzed across Europe. The Polish case is easier, it's only 100,000, but it's full data. So, to sum up, academic stratification is surrounding us. My empirical evidence shows that the academic profession is heavily gender divided, probably as divided as never before. Possibly because it's massified, but possibly there are many other explanations. And public sector reforms is another explanation. Underfunding of academic research is still another explanation. There's a long list of explanations. We are divided, but still, I put it here, nothing is guaranteed today or self-evident today, also in the case of universities. I would say in some countries, but the UK and Poland are critical examples. Things are changing, and then they take almost any direction depending on who's doing the reforms. Let's remember about it. Let's stand together. Divided we fall, I put it nicely. Together we stand, divided we fall. So we have tensions around. We are stratified, but we need to remember that the rules of the game have been designed for science between 50 and 80 years ago. We know those names. We know those books and we know those ideas. When I'm saying fairness and meritocracy is in the center of science, it means that science today is stable. Nobody's protesting. Nobody's really doing strikes like in 1968 because the rules are fair. If we change the rules towards something unexplained, something not really research related, something, oh, let's think of teaching, or let's think of impact, or let's think of collaboration with companies, the whole science edifice will falter because it's based on fairness and meritocracy, and everyone accepts it today. If you see the rules are unclear, unfair, imposed, the whole edifice may collapse. So I'm saying we are stratified, but I'm also saying we know what to do. Keep to the old rules, which have been devised for a purpose. Okay, thank you so much. It mustn't be too long. But anyway, if you have questions, would be...
Thank you very much, Marek. So,
first piece of information for you. When we started our works in ministry, with ministry, to get the best act of higher education.
Can you speak loud, Professor?
Okay. Minister established 3 groups of experts to prepare some assumptions for a new act. Professor KWIEK headed one of this group, and his report has been recognized by us as Conference of Rectors in Poland as the best one. This is a piece of information for you. Question, what was proposed by your team has been taken into account by Ministry concerning new act of education and higher and science, especially taking into account stratification as a subject of this lecture.
Yeah, so the question was, am I happy about it?
Yes. And why not?
I'm looking at this reform issues and policy issues in a different way. There are some directions we can take, and some people are promoting some directions. At that moment in Poland, there was no other direction suggested. I'm saying my direction is, it's nice, it's fair, it's meritocratic, and it's based on data. If there are other suggestions for Poland, which would be equally convincing, I would be delighted to discuss it. But there were none at the moment. But we can always assume that the reform process is a long-term process. We can expect any changes in 2, 3, 5, or 10 years, and nothing is, again, guaranteed. I can imagine wonderful experts in area of whatever, say, quality, teaching quality, who can change everything because they are so convincing, and there are so many young and older people behind it. They just love it. So this is a cautionary tale. There are many arguments around, and there are many proposals around. Some of them are more grounded in data, some of them are less grounded in data, and we need to remember there is a competition between ideas also. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. It's really intriguing, lots of food for thought and heat by the thought. I mean, the ideal academic picture you're painting here becomes kind of a self-fulfilling...
Okay, I didn't mention it. You see it in the camera, okay.
Becomes like a self-fulfilling prophecy, because if you get time for research, you get opportunities to perform, and you perform, you get more opportunities, and over time you get to capitalize on other people's work, co-authors and those who do the service and the teaching. One thing that wasn't really clear for me is that the research top performers and the academic top earners, are these the same people?
I would say they are more or less the same people. Interestingly, I never mentioned it. Up to 80% in the UK, they overlap.
So you said that they take on management tasks as well?
No, I excluded all those involved in management roles. So I was talking about academics plus 40 with long experience and involved in both teaching and research. So I skipped also, for instance, all those who are research only in their positions. I meant a traditional academic who has both teaching and research duties. And then I compared them over clusters of disciplines and in 11 countries. It is really disturbing, but to give you a Polish example again, there's one country in this sample in which it doesn't matter at all whether you do research or not, whether you're a top performer or not. There's no overrepresentation of top performers among top earners. And as you can remember, and as you can imagine, it's Poland. And if we did the survey across Central Eastern Europe, the results would probably be the same. You can do a lot of things, but generally it doesn't matter much in terms of your average academic income. So the most, I would say, egalitarian, Humboldtian, non-entrepreneurial system in this sample of 11 countries is clearly Poland, in every dimension, but also in this one, you reminded me about this overlap. There's no overlap at all in the Polish case.
I just two short questions. The first one is, which was the result which surprised you the most, which you didn't expect, or which is counterintuitive? And the second one, have you compared data in time? So when you mentioned on the last slides that how things change from past to present, you just mentioned some examples, but do you have data which confirms that kind of change as well?
Yeah, first, what was counterintuitive somehow? I didn't realize that you can imagine across 11 systems so bloody different. Post-Humboldtian, French Napoleonic, post-communist, Anglo-Saxon, the contribution of top performers, upper 10%, is about 50%. It could have been 40 or 30 or any other. So it was really surprising. And then what was surprising, based on long-term data, which I took from Scopus, but which I'm not discussing here at all, is that these patterns are really stable over time. 20 years ago, it was the same. And then I look at Jonathan Cole, who was here as keynote speaker a few years ago, and I look at his book, what was the pattern that he described for the 60s, late 60s, beginning 70s. I would say it's always the same. It was probably the most counterintuitive, but also surprising. I mean, I was thinking some people would be smarter over time in those digitalized time. They were just smarter. There were more and more of them. But it's not the case. It's always the 10-50 rule. I call it the 10-50 rule. Over time, over countries, over academic disciplines, The only difference is, if I'm talking longitudinally, is that the influence of young academics is bigger and bigger. So this age stratification cohort is more and more important. Probably those young academics, whatever they say, they do what they really think they need to do, and it's top research. They just feel it. Maybe they don't say it officially. They do a lot of other things, but they do top research. So the contribution of those younger cohorts is bigger and bigger. Obviously, in a system like Poland, you can catch it exactly because you have the data about every academic, date of birth, date of PhD, date of everything. You can show it in details. For Western European countries, it's more complicated because you don't have exact data about the date of birth, but you can think about younger academics, like in terms of associate professors, as opposed to full professors, younger versus older. It's not exactly the age, but it's correlated, highly correlated with age.
I think we have time for 2 more questions, and I see already 2, Sasha and Rio, whatever order.
Thank you very much. It's really interesting. If I can ask you for a bit of help in kind of connecting your argument, you're now making a case for egalitarianism, more channels, more young people, young scholars' participation. Yet you say that academia is now more divided and stratified as it's ever been. How does these two connect?
Yes. It's by egalitarian. I mean the rules are the same for everyone. This is something Jan mentioned. At some point there are some expectations, and if you don't meet them, you suffer or you fall out of the game. I would never say I'm promoting egalitarianism, meaning lack of rules. Everyone is equally important in science, because it's not the case. Egalitarianism is, or I would say fairness. Fairness means the same rules for everyone. Globally, internationally, nationally, institutionally, departmentally. The same set of rules obliging everyone. And then the game is, again, fair. Fair, it's meritocratic. I wouldn't say egalitarianism is a good idea for science, because science is inherently, referring to this slide, elite, inherently undemocratic. And we can't change this. If we change this, it will be the end of science as we know it, I'm sure.
But then if there is greater participation and success rate of the younger scholars, don't we see this pattern that, you have Mandarins who, basically have a lot of young PhDs, colleagues working for them, and then generational shift, and, the younger ones become these sort of proverbial male, middle-aged, full professors. How... Does this destroy your argument?
No, I don't know. But what I'm saying is, across generations, the patterns are again the same. If you take, there's a chapter in the academics under 40. What's happening? How academics under 40 are working, how they are spending time, how they are publishing, and what are the outputs of their work. You see those patterns again. So they are somehow transmitted from generation to generation. Maybe it's just an inherent nature of the human, human mind, or the social construction of science. There's a limited number of those willing to be working in science, smaller and smaller. Some people want to be in science despite all disadvantages. And among those willing to be working in science, there is a not normal distribution of abilities, but this Pareto distribution of abilities. And there's one of those explanations of productivity suggested 50 years ago. It's termed whatever it's termed. It's a wonderful name which I can't now remember. But it says there's a number of those who are superb, and the rest is just very good or good, and we can't change it in the long run. It's one of those big productivity theories.
I think there is room for debate around one of the tables, the academia at the dinner.
Tomorrow.
Well, today. Today,
I did. Oh yes.
So the last question.
Yeah, I will be very, very quick because of the time. I think your work is very regional. I mean, stemming from the CAP studies, it's very, very regional. Thank you. But at a certain point, you said in Europe we have untapped potential. Okay. Well, which is your suggestion to improve and to boost productivity, considering that you found this kind of law of nature, you know, the kind of very skewed productivity, distribution of productivity anyway. So how could you, what kind of recipes would you suggest to policymakers?
I don't think we need recipes. Young academics need some guidance. What they should be doing, what they should be not doing. If they follow that way, or that type of job profile, or that type of spending time every week, every month, every year, they will never get somewhere if they want to get somewhere, depending on the what. So it's a book with some suggestions what to do, what not to do. But I wouldn't expect from the science system as a whole to be more productive. I believe we can't be more productive. There's no reason to be really more productive. We can be more interesting, more relevant, more interdisciplinary, more anything. But we are not able to produce more and more. And we can see it even in our area, which is higher education research. We are producing thousands of papers, and we are basically unable to read them carefully. So there's a limit of perception of the whole academic community. I'm not promoting increasing, boosting productivity at all. It's not worth it, probably.